The emergency signal reached every corner of the Galactic Assembly in less than 3 standard hours. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Chamber, their faces showing various forms of terror. The massive holographic display at the center showed something that made even the oldest council members tremble with fear. A void entity had awakened in the Kessler Nebula. It was older than recorded history, older than the first civilizations that had touched the stars. Ancient texts called it the Devourer of Worlds. It had slept for 10 million years, and now it was awake and hungry. High Chancellor Voron of the Theshan Republic stood at the central podium. His blue skin had turned pale gray from stress. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly as he addressed the gathered representatives. "The entity is moving toward the Orion Arm," Voron said, his voice heavy with dread. "Based on its current path, it will consume 17 inhabited systems within the next standard year. Our scientists estimate a total population loss of approximately 43 billion sentient beings." Murmurs of horror spread through the chamber. Some representatives covered their faces. Others began speaking rapidly into their communication devices, sending warnings to their home worlds. "There is only one way to stop it," Voron continued. "Our combined scientific councils have developed a weapon, a quantum disruptor that can tear apart the entity's molecular structure. But the weapon must be delivered manually. A ship must fly directly into the entity's core and detonate the device there." The chamber fell completely silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Whoever flew that mission would not return. The energy release would destroy everything within 1,000,000 kilometers of the detonation point. "We need volunteers," Voron said. "A crew of at least 10 to pilot the vessel and ensure the weapon reaches its target." For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then the Krellian ambassador rose from his seat. His metallic body gleamed under the chamber lights. "The Krellian collective values logic above all else," he said. "It would be illogical for us to sacrifice our brightest minds on a mission with 0 chance of survival. We must preserve our species. We decline." The Krellians sat down. A wave of similar refusals followed. "The Vorathi cannot participate," said the insectoid representative from Borax Prime. "Our breeding cycles are at a critical point. We cannot spare any warriors. The Theshan Republic regrets that our military doctrine forbids suicide missions," Voron himself said, his voice thick with shame. "We will contribute resources and funding, but not personnel." One by one, every species in the chamber found reasons to refuse. Some cited religious beliefs against self-sacrifice. Others claimed their populations were too small to risk. Many simply admitted they were afraid. Ambassador Sarah Chun of Earth listened to each refusal with growing disbelief. She was a small woman with graying hair and sharp eyes that had seen many difficult negotiations. But she had never witnessed anything like this before. When the last species had declined, Voron spread his hands in a gesture of helplessness. "Then we have no choice but to evacuate as many systems as possible and hope the entity eventually returns to dormancy." "Wait." Sarah Chun stood up. Her voice echoed through the suddenly quiet chamber. Every eye, sensor, and visual organ in the room turned toward her. Some of the representatives looked confused. Others seemed annoyed. The Terran Coalition was still a young member of the Galactic Assembly. Humanity had only been among the stars for 300 years. They were considered primitive by many of the older species. "Earth will send volunteers," Sarah said. Laughter erupted from several sections of the chamber. The Krellian ambassador made a sound that was the equivalent of a snort. "With respect, Ambassador Chun," Voron said, "humans are not known for their technological advancement or military capability. This mission requires the best pilots and soldiers in the galaxy." "You asked for volunteers," Sarah replied calmly. "You did not ask for the best. You asked for the willing." That silenced the laughter. Sarah continued speaking. "When I send word to Earth, I guarantee you that more than 10 people will step forward. I guarantee you that we will have more volunteers than we need, because that is who we are." The Varathi ambassador clicked his mandibles skeptically. "You speak with great confidence for a species so young. How can you be certain your people will choose death?" Sarah smiled, though there was sadness in her eyes. "Because we always have. Throughout our entire history, when danger came, there were always those among us who ran toward it instead of away. We call them heroes. We write songs about them. We teach our children their names. Not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they were brave enough to stand when others could not." She looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of dozens of ancient and powerful civilizations. "You have lived among the stars for millennia. You have conquered disease and hunger and want. You have built wonders that we can barely imagine. But somewhere along the way, you forgot something that we still remember." "And what is that?" Varan asked quietly. "That some things are worth dying for." The message reached Earth 7 hours later. It was broadcast on every channel, transmitted to every device. President Marcus Webb spoke directly to the people of Earth and its colonies. "We need 10 volunteers for a mission with no return. The fate of 43 billion lives depends on it." Within the first hour, over 50,000 people had registered their willingness to go. By the end of the first day, that number had grown to 3 million. They came from every nation, every colony, every walk of life. Soldiers and scientists, doctors and engineers, teachers and artists. Young people who wanted to make their lives mean something. Old people who had already lived their lives and wanted their deaths to mean something more. The selection process took 2 weeks. The final crew of 20 was chosen not for their exceptional abilities, but for their determination and their calm acceptance of what awaited them. Commander Elena Rodriguez was 57 years old. She had been a cargo pilot for most of her career, running supplies between Earth and the outer colonies. She had never done anything remarkable in her life. But when she learned about the mission, she knew she had to go. "My husband died last year," she told the selection committee. "My children are grown and have families of their own. I have maybe 20 years left if I'm lucky. I would rather spend one day saving billions than 2 decades waiting for an ending that means nothing." Lieutenant James Okonkwo was 23. He had just graduated from the Colonial Defense Academy. He had never seen real combat, but he had memorized every word his grandfather had ever told him about serving others. "My grandfather used to say that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else is more important than fear. I am afraid. But those 43 billion people are more important than my fear." Dr. Yuki Tanaka was a xenobiologist who had spent her life studying alien life forms. She was fascinated by the entity they were being sent to destroy. "I have spent 40 years trying to understand the universe. Now I have a chance to protect it. How could I say no?" The Galactic Assembly provided the ship and the weapon. They watched in something close to disbelief as the human crew prepared for departure. Other species sent observers, curious to see these strange beings who seemed so willing to embrace death. A Theshan reporter asked Commander Rodriguez how she felt about the mission. She thought about the question for a long time before answering. "I feel grateful. Grateful that I was born human. Grateful that I was raised to believe that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Grateful that I have this chance to matter." The ship launched from the orbital station above Earth. Millions of people watched it go. They did not cheer or celebrate. They stood in silence and bowed their heads in respect for those who would not return. The journey to the Kessler Nebula took 11 days. Commander Rodriguez used that time to write letters to her children and grandchildren. Lieutenant Okonkwo played chess with Dr. Tanaka. The crew ate meals together and told stories about their lives on Earth. On the 10th day, they could see the entity on their long-range sensors. It was vast beyond comprehension, a dark mass of ancient hunger that seemed to swallow the light from the stars around it. Fear crept into the hearts of even the bravest among them. It is beautiful in a terrible way, Dr. Tanaka said softly. So are we, Commander Rodriguez replied. In our own way. On the final day, the crew gathered in the ship's common room. They held hands and sang an old Earth song about going home. Some of them cried. None of them regretted their choice. The Galactic Assembly watched through long-range observation satellites as the small human vessel approached the entity. They saw it weave through the swirling darkness toward the core. They saw the flash of light when the quantum disruptor detonated. And then they saw the entity begin to break apart. Piece by piece, it dissolved into harmless particles that scattered across the nebula. The devourer of worlds was destroyed. 43 billion lives were saved. The cost was 20 human lives. High Chancellor Voron stood in the Great Chamber and addressed the Galactic Assembly 1 week later. His voice was thick with emotion that his species rarely showed. We called them primitive. We called them young. We thought they had nothing to teach us. He paused and looked at the empty seat where Ambassador Chun usually sat. She was on Earth, attending memorial services for the fallen crew. We were wrong. They taught us the most important lesson of all. They taught us what it means to be truly civilized. It is not technology or power or age. It is the willingness to sacrifice for those who cannot protect themselves. Voron held up a small object. It was a metal plaque bearing the names of the 20 crew members who had given their lives. By unanimous vote, the Galactic Assembly has designated this the Day of Human Remembrance. From this moment forward, humanity will be granted permanent seats on the High Council, not because they are powerful, but because they are worthy. On Earth, people looked up at the stars and knew that somewhere out there, 20 ordinary people had done something extraordinary. Parents told their children about the crew of the ship that had saved billions of lives. Teachers added new names to the history books. And when young people asked why humans were so special among all the species of the galaxy, the answer was always the same. Because when everyone else refused, we chose differently. We chose to be brave. We chose to be human. In the years that followed, the Galactic Assembly faced other threats and other dangers. And every time, when volunteers were needed for the impossible missions, humans were always the first to step forward. Other species began to follow their example, inspired by the courage they had witnessed. The void entity was gone, but its legacy remained in the changed hearts of 1,000 civilizations. And at the center of that change stood a small blue planet and its stubborn, reckless, impossibly brave people. They were young. They were primitive. And they were the greatest heroes the galaxy had ever known. Not because they did not fear death, but because they loved life enough to die protecting it.